Item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. Is there a motion and second? Second. Moved by Bruce, second by Beth. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. The second item on the agenda is approval of the minutes from the February 5th, 2018 meeting. Is there a motion and second?
So moved.
Moved by Bruce.
I'll second that.
Second by Mike. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Item number 3 is presentation and authorization for the mayor to sign the 2017 MS4 report to the DENR. And I think Colin Paulson is going to give that presentation. But first, I'll ask for a motion and second for authorization.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Lom, second by Y, I think.
Yes.
Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Okay, Colin.
Hello. So there's not much that has changed. This is an annual report that we have to do as part of being a MS4 community. And every year we go through this. This is my first year since I guess I just started.
Just for information, MS4 stands for Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System.
Correct.
So didn't want anybody to have to ask. Okay.
To reiterate there, not much has changed from the last year. I think our community's doing pretty well. We keep a close eye on most of this stuff now, and we ask the community to report anything that they see that we may not see or may not know of. So going into the report a little bit, we have a lot of public involvement and participation throughout the year, including our home show, which is actually coming up here, where we do quizzes, handouts, we give away popcorn, and we answer any questions that the public may have. And I know Chad Faust is a huge help to us in our department and as well as the city. He does everything in the paper that you see, and then he also presents to colleges, high schools, grade schools, the Boys and Cub Scouts.
Chad Faust is the LATI environmental science instructor.
Correct. And then just kind of going through a couple more here. Our post-construction stormwater management, that follows, we have our manual that we follow within the engineering department and the construction side of things. And that's something we strive for on all plans, and we keep a close eye on. And we ensure that they're following those protocols to ensure that our storm sewers and our water is being maintained, sediment control and stuff like that. Let's see. Construction site stormwater runoff control. That's also another thing that we've paid really close attention to. There's been a lot of development, a lot of movement in our community in this past year, and that's something that we do strive for as a department, as well as we push our developers and builders to maintain that erosion control. And then kind of just going in, we have to ensure that we do good housekeeping. And I recently wrote a letter telling other department heads that we ask for their help as well going forward. It's not just the engineering department, it's a whole city as a whole that needs to step forward and ensure that we're following these protocols in place, and so we don't lose the guidance from the state. Is there any questions?
Do we hand these out as a like a handout? This is what we need to do with every contractor, anyone that takes out a building permit?
Yes and no. I would say there's definitely a handout. Building Services does give out handouts, including silt fence, inlet protection and things like that. And then as we get the plans, we also review what they have in place, and we have to review their stormwater pollution prevention plan, otherwise known as a SWIP. And as we're reviewing that, we make comments too of how we think that they could improve the downstream side of things, usually to prevent erosion. And a good example would be Valley View this past summer. And a SWIP is a living document, so they can make changes as they go. It's not set in stone. So as these storm events kept popping up, we would run out there and say, okay, well, we see a failure spot here, let's improve that. So let's try this instead of this time. So that's something that is always ongoing.
Okay.
Thanks. Glenn?
What happens to this? I mean, we submit this to the state DENR, and is that what? I mean, and is this? I don't want to insult anybody, but I mean, is this looked at closely or audit? In other words, could we put anything down on this as far as answering it appropriately, and nobody know the difference?
Oh no, they're going to go through it with a fine-tooth comb.
Okay.
They will send a letter back to us telling us what we missed and what they want us to improve on. They do read it. It doesn't just go on a shelf.
Okay. Well, I'm glad to hear that. I mean, I've seen some of these things where you fill it out and send it in and nobody ever pays any attention to it. Just check it off that it was submitted. So good to hear.
They always return a to-do list to us.
Yes. And as part of that, too, that's where the good housekeeping comes in. They have the right to come in at any point. They could come to our community in person and say, we need to see these records. And that's why we really need to maintain those records, so we just can point to it.
They do that, too. The DENR does pop in every year, a couple of times unannounced, and they'll look for construction sites and ask to see the appropriate documentation. Some are construction sites as well as private, not just ours. So, yeah, they keep us on our toes. And Lori Marscheider, taking notes back there, does a ton of work to tabulate everything that we're doing and document. So thanks, Lori.
And
it's a lot of work.
She helped tremendously with this as well. Mm-hmm. Going from year to year, she can help update some stuff. And so thank you.
Yeah. And we're beating our deadline of getting it to them before the 1st of March.
Yes.
So we have a motion and a second for a recommendation. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Thanks, Colin. Okay, the next item on the agenda is presentation of Cottington County Pre-Disaster Mitigation Plan 2017 to 2022 by First District Association of Local Governments. And Ted Hayter's here to tell us about this. But before you start, I would like a motion and second for recommendation of authorization for this to go forward. Am I signing a document? Do you know?
Be signing an adoption letter to adopt the Cottington County Pre-Disaster Mitigation Plan tonight.
Okay, so I'll look for a motion second to recommend approval
Second.
of that. Moved by Mike and second by Beth. Okay, Ted.
Okay, I wish I had a long, exciting spiel to give to you, but this is an update of an existing pre-disaster mitigation plan. It was a 5-year cycle that was up in 2017. We completed the update. The State of South Dakota Office of Emergency Management reviewed it, approved it. FEMA looked at it, reviewed it, and approved it. And now we're in the process of formal adoption by municipalities and the counties. Jim Sutton, the emergency manager, would be here, but I think he's in Arizona. So he asked me to come instead. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
So is this actually, we're backdating this to 2017 then, since it's 2017 through 2022?
The last one expired theoretically in 17. Now we're just adopting the 17 to 22. So it's a title for the plan.
Okay.
To be concurrent.
This document has to be adopted by us for the community rating system for FEMA for our flood insurance rating, among other things. That's one of the things. This covers a lot of flooding elements in it.
It does. It also helps you be grant eligible for projects like a tornado safe room, flood buyouts, other disaster related improvements that the city could make.
All right. Any questions? See none, I'll look for action. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Thanks, Ted. Item 5 is discussion and recommendation of alternative accommodations for two-way traffic on Kemp Avenue at Highway 81. And I see Dan Martell is in the audience. He's with the DOT. If you wouldn't mind coming up so you can correct me immediately if I make a mistake. They had a little model video that was presented to the council in 2008 when eliminating the signal was proposed by the DOT. But just to give a little bit of background on what we're talking about here, the city has decided to move forward with returning Kemp Avenue to two-way traffic. Right now, Kemp is only westbound, and when we add an eastbound lane on Kemp, there's no signal head at the signal at Kemp and Highway 81. So we asked the DOT if they would provide one. And they said yes, they would. Unfortunately, the rules for American Disabilities Act have changed a little bit. And so if they touch that intersection, they have to bring the entire intersection up to current ADA standards. And the cost of doing that could be as much as $200,000. This is a relatively new signal being installed in 2008. And when the DOT came through and upgraded Highway 81, as you might remember, that was a two-phase project. The south part was first, followed by the north part, and the dividing line was around 3rd Avenue North, as I recall. So this was in the south section. And when the DOT was designing that first phase, they came to the city and asked if we would consider removing the signal at Kemp and Highway 81. The Public Works Committee looked at the recommendation from the DOT and voted to eliminate the signal in 2008. And I found those minutes. Unfortunately, I didn't find anything else. I couldn't find any other council action. And so I'm not sure why we didn't eliminate it after the council acted to eliminate it. The council had said, we want, in exchange for removing this one, we want a signal installed at 10th Avenue North. And when phase 2 occurred, they installed a signal at 10th Avenue North. And so I'm not really sure. Don, did you find out? Okay. So I don't know why we did not eliminate the signal at that time, but we didn't. It still remains. But the DOT had studied it back then and found that removal of the signal actually facilitates better traffic movement in the region. So you're not stop 3 blocks in a row. As you know, we have a signal at 1st Avenue North, at Kemp, and at 1st Avenue South. So 3 signals right in a row in very close proximity. Taking the middle one out would actually eliminate a stopping point and facilitate movement. So that's the basis for the recommendation. And the DOT had done traffic counts and models at that time. And can you, yes, go to the mic. So.
Yeah, we've also done a traffic count this summer, so we've got some recent traffic counts of the intersections too.
Okay, and so it's still the belief of the DOT that removal of that signal will not hinder the traffic flow?
We would like to look at it again, since now Kemp is not only just our intersection that goes away from goes away to the west. Now that we're gonna have them coming in, what we're looking for is, basically, if you guys would entertain changing the control there, that we, actually do a study, because it takes about a month to a month and a half for me to do that. So
Okay,
don't really want to get into that unless you guys were willing to look at it.
right. So there is a third option. One option would be leave it alone and upgrade it, and we think that will cost about $200,000. The other option is eliminate it altogether, and then the third intermediate option would be to replace the signal with a pedestrian activated walk signal, which would stop traffic on the highway whenever a pedestrian was trying to cross the highway. That upgrade would be significantly less expensive than upgrading the signal system. So we're thinking $16,000 maybe. Something that was just a rough.
Right, because we use most of the existing equipment out there. We'd have to buy a few heads, because those are 2 red lights above with 1 yellow down below it, and then removal of the excessive signal equipment.
Right. So that's an option as well. And so we really have 3 options. And if the council would vote to remove the signal, would you still have to do a study?
Yes, I think we'd want to do a study, make sure removing it was the right thing to do. We don't want to remove it and find out it wasn't the right thing to do.
Okay. So would you do the study no matter how they vote? Or
Correct. If you voted, there's no way that you wanted to keep it, then we wouldn't do the study. But if you consider removing it, we would do the study.
Okay, and then so there's a time element here as well. If the council decides to stay with the signal and upgrade it, that could take several years, maybe up to 3 years, to get all the work done to move that back. So that obviously is going to mean that we don't turn Kemp to 2-way this year. Mike?
By putting the pedestrian activated lighting system in, that doesn't trigger the need for that intersection to become fully ADA compliant?
We would now they're only cross east-west, right? Which currently is set for accommodate pedestrians going across 81. Where we're not accommodate for pedestrians is cross on Kemp Street. And that's where we'd have to update if we did the signals. We'd have to add more PED buttons for each movement, as well as audible. We'd have to put the audibles in, is about the only change we'd have to make.
Do we know what kind of pedestrian traffic we have there?
We've got it on the counts. It isn't that high, but where we count is usually not during your prime times. You guys got stuff that happens downtown in the evenings and stuff like that. That would probably generate a lot more pedestrians than what we've did in our count, because we're talking somewhere probably between 5 and 10. I haven't looked at it, so I can't answer for sure what the number is, but that'd be kind of typical of what it was in the past, and that's in a day.
How comfortable are you that the estimated dollar figure for reconfiguring the requirements if a whole new light system in it is something close to $200,000?
Pretty good. Just to put another mast arm signal pole up is about $55,000. We got mobilization, traffic control that has to go in there. Each one of these PED buttons now costs about $9,000 a button. There's going to be 4 more of those, plus we got to update 4, so there's 8 of those. And then plus the work we'd have to do to the concrete to make the landings for wheelchairs and stuff like that by the PED buttons. We may get into right-of-way. That may add another year onto the time if we got into right-of-way.
Don?
From a north-south perspective, I think getting rid of the light makes a lot of sense. Would you comment on the east and west? Because now if it's going to be a 2-way street, there's going to be traffic that's going to want to go east and west across the highway without a light. What difficulties does that present?
Yeah, that's the part we're worried about, is them coming off of Kemp now. Easy when they're just going away from Kemp. That's why we'd like to do the study, if you guys would entertain it, to make sure that we could accommodate the cars. We might be able to use the signals at first north, first south to produce gaps for them to come out. And we can time those in such a manner. if we, seeing that, that isn't too bad, it may work really well even without little adjustment to the signals. It's hard to say without, until we get in there and I have to project traffic out and plus move traffic around as I see fit, is, best guessing where traffic is going and coming from.
Dan, how long will it take to complete the traffic study?
It'd probably take me a month to month and a half.
Okay. And tonight, what you're looking for is just that the council will consider removing the signal if the data supports that?
Right. We would actually, if you guys wish, come back and give you a presentation on what our findings too.
Okay. Dan?
Can we include a pedestrian traffic count on that? It seems like that's a real key issue to me.
Yeah.
That
When we do our
I mean, it's bad enough that the cars can't get across, but if people are walking from that direction either way and have 4 lanes of traffic that are now moving, you couldn't use Kemp anymore to walk across, I would guess.
Right, and that's, would be one, we do count them when we do our turning movement counts, stuff like that. We might even do another one because I can't remember if we did the last one before first was switched over or not. So we may end up just doing some peak hour counts, which we can do them fairly quick in a day's time. And again, we do pedestrians, but it's a little tough this time of year to get a good pedestrian count.
Pedestrians are hiding inside.
Yes, now that's where the pedestrian hybrid signal, like up at this Lutheran school, is kind of a nice thing. We would sure entertain that.
The pedestrians would still be able to cross Kemp north-south. They just wouldn't have a signal.
Yeah, the signal only for them to cross 81.
Right.
What does that? I'm sorry. Go ahead, Glenn. I'm sorry.
A couple questions. What's the average width of 81 versus 212?
Oh, 81 is probably 60 feet across, I'm guessing. I can't remember if that's narrow there or not. 212 is a narrower lane. It used to be a 4-lane in there with parking, so it's like 52 across that
Really?
lane.
The reason I ask the question is, I mean, I've walked across or had to run across 212 a number of times, and that would really concern me if we're asking people to do the same thing now on 81 if we don't have a controlled crossing for pedestrians there. So I'd be really concerned about the safety aspect.
I did just measure that. It is 60 feet curb to curb. So
Which?
81.
What's 212?
I guess 50 or 52. It's narrower.
Okay. And then secondly, I realized traffic was going a different direction, but why didn't we have these issues with First Avenue South when we made that conversion last year?
Oh, Kemp is a little different. Kemp is more of a, the business district where you got the turnover traffic. The type of businesses are more along Kemp than they would be along First.
We didn't have to add anything to that.
No, all
signal.
we did was do some pavement marking changes because that was actually going
right. That was
coming
our,
out of Kemp already,
right.
So we had all the signal displays, and there we just had to change a stripe in a turn lane.
Other questions? Mike?
The pedestrian, for example, the one that was put up on North 81 by the Lutheran School, what's something like that cost? What is that?
Well, that one there probably cost us $50,000 to $60,000. But since we got all the equipment at the location here, it's a lot cheaper. We would take one of the mast arms and just spin it so it overhangs the highway that's on Kemp. So one of the, probably the one in the northwest quadrant is probably the one I'd spin around and use those two on the north side.
Okay.
Any other questions?
No, but Mayor, I think we just have to defer to your data. I think the data is important. It makes good sense to me. If the data tells us it's good sense, at that point I got to defer to you guys as the experts here. And I know there's concerns, but I would hope that your data would at least tell us, are we marginal or are we not marginal in regards to concerns.
And even if we would decide to go away from that, we probably would turn them into a flashing operation and make sure we were correct before we would start making the bigger changes.
So
excuse me. So from your standpoint, and I know it's going to have time and effort and money involved in the study, which is I think what I'm hearing from you, that you don't want to get going on this if we're going to kind of say
mostly
let's
time-wise with other duties I have.
Yeah. So what will you be looking from us tonight then, so that you know what to do tomorrow morning when you wake up?
No. I try to be in Sioux Falls, but
yeah.
No, just kind of looking that, you guys would actually consider it if we could find that it was worthwhile to move the signal, that we would also present you with our findings and discuss it all over again. If there was, no way that you guys would even consider removing it, then we would not go forward with the study.
Don?
Just a comment. I guess I would be in favor of the traffic study for the following main reason. That's that we're trying to get traffic in Uptown to slow down and people to come and use downtown Watertown. If Kemp becomes inaccessible, if that becomes running the gauntlet to traveling to the west, that might deter people from going downtown. They can always go right then down first, but it makes it just a little bit harder. Would you just comment on that?
Well, it's kind of hard to comment on now until we actually start looking at, what we can do, how much is going in there, how much the other signals are produced for gaps, how much we can use them to produce gaps without causing great delay at those intersections too. So it's kind of a balancing act and see if it actually is worthwhile.
Do you feel the traffic going to the north, coming out of Kemp, would be the most difficult? Taking a left onto 81 and then heading north?
Eastbound to go north?
Yeah.
Yeah, that is by far the worst move. That's one that takes the longest, needs the largest gap. A car would need about 7.6 seconds to make that left turn. From a stop is kind of out of the Asheville Green Book is kind of what the number they use in Highway Capacity Manual.
Okay. But if they're heading into Kemp, taking a right.
Oh, that's easy.
Yeah, it's an easy one, but.
Yeah, cross, and of course the left is by far the worst one.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, that's an easier question that you're asking than I was posing to the council. Glenn?
I just want to make sure I understand. So if we go with option 2 or 3, you're going to do your study?
Yes.
Okay.
If you consider them.
Okay.
Yeah, you don't have to pick one now because we don't want to make a change if we don't think this thing is going to work.
So we don't need to commit ourselves to one or the other tonight.
Correct.
As long as we decide that one of those is the way we want to go. Okay.
Yeah, if you consider the possibility of going those ways, yeah. Because we find out it isn't a good thing to do, we would not recommend doing it.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Do you
Any
need
other
us?
questions?
Do you need us to make a recommendation?
I do, yes, I'd like a motion for a recommendation if someone wants to say it.
Yep. I'll make a motion to look at either completely removing the signal or replace the pedestrian signal after the DOT does their traffic study.
I would second that.
All right, motion by Lom, second by Manti. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Thank you, Dan.
Yay.
Item number 6 is request authorization for the mayor to sign agreement for engineering services with HDR Engineering for the wastewater treatment facility administration building evaluation project number 1817. Mike?
Thanks. A request for proposals was sent out to 3 engineering firms, AECom, HR Green, and HDR, to solicit proposals for engineering services to evaluate the wastewater facility's need for an administration building, and then to provide pre-design cost estimates for design engineering and construction costs. All 3 of these firms have worked with our wastewater department multiple times over the last 23 years. AECom has worked with us on 5 or more major projects, HR Green 3 or more projects, and HDR 3 or more projects. Of those 3 firms, AECom declined to submit a proposal. They did not think they could compete the evaluation for the price budgeted, and thought they would be at a disadvantage when competing with more local firms because of the cost of bringing out their different design engineers to our facility, and so they declined. HR Green provided a proposal that ranged in price from $42,500 to $48,500. The 6,000 spread there where they were wanting us to consider some additional engineering services, some electrical and some mechanical. And so their proposal would have exceeded our budget by $19,500 to $20,500. And I would also point out that they did propose to utilize a subcontracting architectural firm, which added some cost to their proposal. So the third proposal from HDR Incorporated of Sioux Falls is before you tonight. That's for $22,795. It meets the requirements of the request for proposals, and it's within the $23,000 that we budgeted for the process. The proposals were reviewed by Craig Mitchell, Shane Waterman, and I, so we'd like to request authorization for the mayor to sign this agreement for engineering services with HDR of Sioux Falls. Again, for the wastewater space evaluation administration building services, and this is based upon the cost as well as their proposal really gave us what we asked for in the RFP and really nothing extra, so it comes within budget. So,
all right, is there a motion? Moved by Mike, second by Bruce. Any further discussion or questions for Mike? Okay, all those in favor, sorry, Glenn?
I guess I always get nervous when there's that much of a spread in a bid for professional services. But you're satisfied that.
I think the two prices we got, the higher price went beyond what we had requested, and then they did, like I said, they had a subcontract for some architectural services, whereas the other firm could draw on those resources within their organization, and so I think they gave us what we requested, and they were. Both firms knew what we had budgeted for the processes also, so the evaluation.
Okay. Thank you, Mike. Anything else? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Item number 7 is authorization to advertise for bids for the following. And we've got 4 different projects there, and I'll let Shane talk about each of these, and then we'll take the motions as we go. Shane?
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Put my screen up. Okay. First project, we've talked about this a little bit previously with regard to the assessment or potential assessment project here. This is 3rd Avenue Southwest. It will be improved from 13th Street Southwest to 18th Street Southwest, and primarily the project is to replace the aging pavement, but as we've discussed, there is a potential of assessment project to install the curb and gutter in the gaps, and we've been working with the residents along there and are going to propose bidding that curb as an alternate in the bid, and then we'll get that information back to them and they can decide if they want to proceed with the assessments or not at that time. So that's where we're at with this project. Any questions?
I think I'll take the motions as we go, so
okay.
they don't forget if they have any questions. So is there a motion and a second? No. To authorize advertising for bids?
I'll make that one.
Moved by Mike, second by Adam. All right, any questions or discussion?
Jane, I got one question. Just out of curiosity, how was this section of road picked for a project? Did we use any of the data that we had?
Yep, exactly. For the next 5 years, unless something gets brought to our attention that supplants the data that came out of the IMS pavement management study, our focus is to try to embrace that study and do what we feel is best within that 5-year focus they gave us. And we'll interject projects if we find something that we don't agree with. We'll try to supplant in some other projects, but we are using that as our main focus now and trying to utilize what we were given for tools in that. Okay.
Any other questions? Josh?
Have you, since this hit the media, have you heard from any of these residents?
I have.
Have you now?
Yep. And some in support, some I won't say they've turned it down yet. They're waiting for that additional information. So, okay.
Don?
I know we discussed this quite a bit at our last meeting. Would you remind me what the alternate bid is, just would you?
Okay, so we have about 1,000 feet of curb and gutter that's not installed on the north side of this road. And what we would do is do an alternate in our bid schedule just for that curb and gutter, and then we'll get a hard cost, from a contractor. Then we'll present that information to those property owners and let them decide if they want to proceed with getting curb installed in front of their property or not. And we did have some discussion as to whether it would be all or none, and I guess if people are willing to voluntarily participate, I would encourage us to accept any of them that would want to do it, and then if they decline to, then we could just allow people to decline. But
so we could potentially end up with a street where there's curb and gutter on part of it and no curb and gutter on the other part of it.
We already have that today.
I know that, but
yeah.
my point is we're trying to correct these situations in
right.
the community. And I know this is the way we talked about doing it. So you're doing exactly the way it was rolled out last meeting, but I just would challenge our thinking a little bit that if we give alternatives, there's people who are going to take that alternative. And I just don't think we should be putting curb and gutter in parts of the street and not parts of the other one. We've got many situations in the city with gravel and no curb and gutter, and we're trying to clean that up. And I think by giving that alternative, it's almost guaranteed somebody will take it. And there are other parts in town where people have to put curb and gutter in, and they never got that option.
Point taken.
Adam?
I thought we were under the understanding that we would do it with the alternative just to see if there was pushback.
That's where we're at.
And it was either they would all do it or they wouldn't. Based on how many responses we got.
I remember that comment. I don't know that was the action that was taken, but that we'll vet that when I know if there's acceptance or not.
Done.
My concern is the expectation level we're setting. So my expectation level is I would vote that everybody has to follow the rules the same way. That's my expectation, looking towards that vote coming up someday.
We wouldn't be probably giving an alternative if this were prompted by the property owners wanting to do this. We're the ones starting this action because this road's in bad condition and we have a responsibility to maintain it. So it's an opportunity to get some curb and gutter. Maybe they'll take us up.
Correct. I mean, it's the best opportunity for these landowners to get back up to.
They won't get it cheaper later.
That's exactly right.
Right. Any other questions or comments? Okay, we have a motion to authorize advertising for bids for 3rd Avenue Southwest construction project number 1806. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Okay, Shane.
I apologize if I got these out of order,
That's
but
okay.
11th Avenue Southwest is the next project. Again, this project was prompted through the IMS pavement management study as a priority project. We're looking at improvements from 14th Street Southwest all the way over to 24th Street Southwest. Now, a portion of this project will be complete reconstruct of the pavement. We're not proposing to replace any curb and gutter on a wholesale level. We'll look at some bad segments and replace them as needed. But from 22nd Street to 24th Street will likely be a mill and overlay. And then we'll look at the pavement condition on the rest of the segment with the idea that we're going to do base correction and replace the pavement surface. So that's the scope of this project.
Right, is there a motion and second to authorize advertising for bids?
I'll move.
Moved by Beth, second by Adam. Any questions or discussion? Mike?
Shane, on this particular one, I mean, it's really not all that old, but do we know if that was built to city standards in the first place? I mean, do we have an understanding if it was or not?
I believe it was, but what the majority of the problems as we see it is high water table and whether or not they actually did need to look at a deeper base correction. And we're actually going to look at that now and maybe put some. We did an experiment in part of this where we did put some oversized rock in and repaved it already. And we're evaluating how well that has performed and proposing to enhance the base here to support the road for a longer period of time. Okay.
We maybe didn't have very high standards.
Yeah.
They met our standards.
Right. Right. It was likely a 3-inch asphalt over a 6-inch base or something like that back in the time frame that this was built, and we'll do something more than that.
We wouldn't build it like that today. With these soil conditions, we'd use fabric and probably a thicker base. Someone have a question, Josh?
Shane, the adjacent trailer court or mobile home park just to the east of that, that's not included in that short section right there? Yeah.
This is all private
That's
roads.
private roads?
Yep.
Okay, that's...
Good question.
Any other questions or comments? All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. All right, Shane?
Okay, the next project that we're looking at, and so working with the street department to kind of solidify this, but it's our mill and overlay project, and our IMS study focused on Golf Course Road, starting at the intersection of 4th Avenue down here by the airport, and it really identified it all the way over to the intersection. I believe that's 42nd Street or 43rd, something like that. Was where that ended. However, we do have some carryover funding from last year's mill and overlay project. So we're actually looking at a portion of South Lake Drive was part of the high priority list for the street department. So we're looking at maybe starting the project over here along South Lake Drive and doing a portion there, and then moving east as far as our budget would go this year, and then pick up the remainder next year. That's what I'm working on right now, and I have to work with the street department to make sure that we solidify that plan and approach. But that's what the IMS project showed us as a priority for the mill and overlay at this time. So.
All right, I'm going to look for a motion and second, then we'll have questions. So is there a motion? Second. Moved by Bruce, second by Josh.
Everyone?
All right. Now you can ask a question,
Okay.
Adam.
Is that just going to strictly be mill and overlay on that then? Or are we going to have to do any road base repair or anything like that on that
No,
one?
we're just, well, we may have to do some patching, because if the existing road surface has small isolated failures, we'll patch those, then we'll overlay it so that we don't have a compromised base lift of the roadway. But we've actually entertained not milling it, but I think with the nature of the cracks that develop on the surface, we're probably going to take an inch off and put like a 2-inch mat back over the top of it. So we'll have a net gain of an inch, but so we'll strengthen up the roadway in the course of this project too. So,
time frame on that? How long will that?
It'll be
obviously weather.
Sometime this summer. We'll take bids here in the next month and a half, and then we'll let the contractor vet it out. It'll be sometime June through October.
We generally give them a big, wide window. That keeps the price down. If we tell them exactly when they have to do it, it drives the price up.
Sure.
So.
Any other questions or comments, Glenn?
Okay, if I understand where you're looking at having this done, that goes right past our West Fire Station, right?
Yes.
Okay, is that going to be any issue during that time period? Are there any concerns there?
No, very minor concerns, I would say. We're never going to have the street shut down. It'll be under traffic almost the entire time that we're building it. If a call came out right when we were right in the front of the driveway, would be about as worst case scenario as we would find. But we'll visit with the fire department and their staff and ask them how they want to best handle that. We had a similar situation last year where we wanted to make sure that we kept the entrance to the Brown Clinic on North 14th Avenue open at all times. So we do write special provisions in to try to accommodate those kind of issues. So good question.
Dan, did you have a question? Got it answered. Any other questions? All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Okay, last one, Shane.
Okay, last project is the Sealcoat, and of course the discussion we just had earlier with regard to Kemp one-way conversion will be impacted by on the Sealcoat project. But right now, we've done we've seal-coated everything on the truck bypass from Highway 81 to the east up to 29th Street. And so one of the areas the street department's asked us to look at is the remainder of the truck bypass over to between Highway 20 and Highway 81. That's one segment we're considering. And of course, the other priority would be Kemp if we proceed with the conversion. And what we'll do is I'll earmark Kemp in that Sealcoat project, and we'll have an alternate street of about the same size that will move that Sealcoat over to if that project doesn't go forward with the conversion. So that's how I'll approach the Sealcoat project for now for this year. So,
is there a motion and second for authorization? Moved by Adam, second by Beth. Any questions or discussion? All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Thank you. Is there any old business? Any new business? There's no reason for us to go into executive session, so I will adjourn the meeting. We'll be back at 7 for the council meeting because there is no finance committee meeting tonight.